After speaking yesterday at the NFL Scouting Combine and offering, well, what my co-host believes not a whole lot, the Arizona Cardinals have extended Kliff Kingsbury, general manager Steve Keim, through the 2027 season. Was it the right move for the organization to show long-term stability? We're going to get into this conversation. You will not be let down. I guarantee fireworks on this impromptu live edition of Locked On Cardinals. Brack, Alex Clancy, let's go.
You are Locked On Cardinals, your daily Arizona Cardinals podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Just thought it was going to be a mild-mannered Wednesday morning. We had our podcast already premiere on YouTube. Check that one out. We gave our thoughts as far as Kliff Kingsbury speaking at the press conference of the NFL Scouting Combine, Steve Keim's comments, mostly regarding Kyler Murray. They hadn't talked to Eric Burkhardt. They hadn't talked to Kyler Murray since the statement came out on Monday, and now we probably see the reason why. They were hammering out their own extensions through the 2027 season. Brack, Alex Clancy, thanks for making Locked On Cardinals your first listen. Thanks for chiming in and making us your primary, your essential listening when news breaks, because that's what we do. When news breaks, we pop on the mics, we pop on the cameras, and we're talking about it. And Kingsbury and Keim, their deals run through 2027. After the Arizona Cardinals, they make the playoffs, they win 11 games, but the season, it ended in disaster. So, Alex, when we look at this move, why now? And what does it mean for the organization going forward?
May as well just give them the Bill Self contract. However long you want to be here, guys. I think this is terrible. And I'm going to speak completely rationally here. I tweeted out a bunch of things that I truly believe in. I don't say things just for clickbait. What a terrible decision. This is a terrible decision. And there's a couple reasons why it's a terrible decision. Let's take away all of the, take away the draft problems and Kliff Kingsbury not being able to elevate players. Let's just take away that, my thought process on that. 5 years is a long time. Okay, number one. And I know it's not our money. I know that it doesn't go against the cap. I know all of those things. I'm aware of all of it. And I'm also aware that just because you extend the general manager and the head coach, that doesn't mean that this is going to be a stable organization. I see stability get thrown around a lot. What's stable about Steve Keim? What's stable about Kliff Kingsbury? Their paychecks from Michael Bidwell. That's what's stable. The ecosystem around the Arizona Cardinals organization, not stable. The future of the Cardinals organization, not stable. So I don't care if they're getting a paycheck from the same employer for the next 5 years. That doesn't mean that this adds stability to the organization.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm going to disagree for the most part with that. As far as when you look at their resumes, and it's outlined in the press release about the new extension, if you were creating a court case, you'd have a tough time beating and defeating the idea that they don't deserve to at least continue their jobs. A 5-year extension, I think a lot of people are just completely, their mind is blown by that. But one thing that is also key here is Kyler Murray's agent is the same one that Kliff Kingsbury is represented by. And if you're extending Kliff Kingsbury, you're creating goodwill between the organization and Kyler Murray's agent. And when you look at as far as stability, when you have prospective free agents, people that are on the outside of this organization and they're looking at it from there, you've got your quarterback soon to be extended. You've got your head coach in place. There's not going to be this organization has shown, maybe to a fault, that it's not going to have a knee-jerk reaction to small sample sizes of a season, no matter if it came at the end of the season and it showed to be disastrous and embarrassing, this organization views progress as progress. Any amount of progress is progress to this organization. They're not looking for as much as they would love for this team to make a miraculous jump, they perceive that the organization from where it was in 2018 and where it is now, they give a lot of credit to Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury for getting them to where they are now. And that's coming off a first playoff appearance in 5 years and off an 11-win season. Look, I'm not saying this from like an opinion thing. That's just what this organization, how they view this. And I got to imagine you say that like the organization or they need to separate Kliff Kingsbury sharing an agent with Kyler Murray. They're not going to separate that. This was a move to appease Eric Burkhart, the same representation of Kyler Murray. Like they weren't going to have Kliff Kingsbury be a lame duck coach with 1 year left on his contract. It only helps negotiations with Kyler going forward, don't you think?
Extending Kyler Murray was never an issue. If they fired Kliff Kingsbury right now, they would still extend Kyler Murray. Like one doesn't have to do with the other. Just because, like it doesn't. Kyler Murray is going to play football without Kliff Kingsbury as his head coach at some point. Whether
it doesn't help, it doesn't help Eric Burkhart, the agent.
Who gives a rip about Eric Burkhart?
Because Eric Burkhart is the one that's holding the keys to Kyler Murray's extension.
If thinking that extending Kliff Kingsbury by 5 years is going to be what's the best course of action for the win-loss record for the Arizona Cardinals, that's delusional. Okay? Kyler Murray's the prize here. Kliff Kingsbury shouldn't be here.
Okay. But but I do want you to look at just the hard facts and I understand what you're projecting as far as how they finished and how they've improved from each season under Kliff Kingsbury. Like those are the cold hard facts. Like this organization under Kliff Kingsbury, under Steve Keim from 2018 has improved by at least 2 wins each season. The offense has taken a step forward in every major statistical category. Like
why is that?
Why? Because of, you can't just say it's all Kyler Murray. You just can't. That's irresponsible.
But it's not.
Now
you
trying
can't
to see
compare.
What's
I get it. No, I get it. I'm just like the comparison. The comparison from 2018 to now. If it was the same roster, if it was the same quarterback, sure, let's make that comparison. Let's give them $100 million contracts each. It wasn't. It was Sam Bradford and Mike Glennon and Josh Rosen with one of the worst offenses in NFL history. The 2018 Arizona Cardinals scored less points per game on average than the 2008 Detroit Lions that went 0-16. Okay?
Correct.
So when you're giving credit to Kliff Kingsbury for having a completely different roster, I think that's kind of an act of futility. Now, moving forward, them having 11 wins, absolutely. You have to give credit where credit is due in some capacity. But backing up the Brinks truck for getting a 5th place medal, ooh, you know what? They won more games than they lost in the regular season. I can name 12, 15 teams that had better seasons last year than the Arizona Cardinals, a lot of which had less wins. Because the way that thing ended, we're looking like the whole season – or we're looking like they started 2-7 and made the playoffs and won 11 games. 7-0, 10-2, didn't clinch the playoffs on their own. That's the world that we live in. And now you're looking at the win-loss record like you're looking on Wikipedia to fact check something. Not all 11 wins are created equal. And listen, even if you say you give him an extension, you might be able to get me on board for that. 2 years. Okay? You're giving him half of a decade when neither of them, in my opinion, regardless of the win-loss record at the end of the season, should be employed by the Arizona Cardinals. So this is a cluster F. It is, in my opinion.
As far as into your own point, is no salary cap. If they cut bait at any point, they're not married to these guys going forward. Despite
sure they are.
You can't. Well, no, you can fire them anytime you want. You just have to absorb their salary. It happens in the NFL all the time. It happens in college, and there's enormous amount of salary that's being absorbed by universities.
I know. Yeah, I know.
Is ridiculous. I mean, Steve Keim's not going anywhere. Like we knew that it was going to take moving heaven and earth for Michael Bidwill to move off of Steve Keim. Like the reality is everything that Michael Bidwill knows about team building in football is all from Steve Keim. Like, unfortunately, it's just, and that's probably the biggest problem with Michael Bidwill as far as running this organization is that he's hitched his wagon to Steve Keim. But I just want to, like, I want to put things in perspective because you're so attached to how things ended. And that's part of the equation. It's a big part of the equation. But if you were tasked with doing a job and you're tasked years ago to take an organization that was at the very bottom of their league and they said, improve the offense, improve in wins, and he's done that. And then you're going to say, we're done with you. I don't care what profession you are. You have a big, you have a legit gripe about that.
Yeah.
Like your criticisms of Kliff Kingsbury, I feel like are unfair because if you were put in the same boat in your same profession and you were to pretty much do what was asked and then that's not good enough, that sets a bad precedent for an organization. Now, I'm not saying go and give them a 5-year extension, but at least I mean, that's what's the most puzzling. But I think what it is, and I don't know why the Steve Keim thing came down. Like, it's like these guys are the package deal. It's still pretty astounding.
Yeah. I mean, this is a Jerry Jones move. This is a move. This is a Steve Keim overpaying a player move where it's like, you know what? My choice. It worked. Michael Bidwill, I'm giving everybody an extension. Everybody's getting one. Because I'm the smartest person in the room when the ineptitude does not stop in the GM's office. Okay. The thing is, and you bring up a good point. Like, yes, on paper, absolutely. What we've seen is exponential growth from 2018 through 2021. 100%, no doubt about it. And on top of that, the same problems that plagued the 2020 season downfall we saw in week 1 in Tennessee during the first offensive drive that was set up by a Chandler Jones strip sack. We saw it immediately. People are saying, oh yeah, look, why are you so negative all the time? They won by 3 touchdowns. The problems are still the same. And when push comes to shove, that's what's going to stand out. And guess what? That stood out. That stood out. False starts, bad penalties, not getting in the end zone when you need to. That's what stood out for the second half of the season. When the winning goes away, when it's not as easy to win, what do we see? A head coach that's unable to put together wins when absolutely necessary, to make the right play calls when absolutely necessary, and a GM who is so terrible at drafting that he puts his head coach and all of his players in a bad situation because once 2 people get injured, the whole ship is rocked. That's what happened. You're talking about what happened with the record. That's what happened down the stretch. Whether it's positive, negative, who cares? That's what happened the last half of the season. The last, third of the season.
Yeah,
it's true.
No, it's not. I mean, your example's terrible to use the first drive of the season, and then the team does.
Did it change?
They blew the doors off the Titans, and then they started 7-0. They go 10-2. Yeah, things were a lot better. And if you can't see that, then you're being a little hard-headed, in my opinion.
The same issues.
It's not
were throughout the season. Yes, they were.
Look at the team as a whole. Look at it offensively because it didn't. They tell a completely different story. You can cherry pick different examples because guess what? The NFL's freaking hard, dude. It's damn near impossible at times. But the Arizona Cardinals have shown progress. They've shown progress under this regime. I am still and it's tough for me because I'm put in a position to have to defend this, but this 5-year extension. No, but I mean, we can have a conversation, but I think you're being irrational as far as some of your points. The team has shown progress each and every season. The team showed immense progress at the beginning of the season. They fell off. But if also you're not going to show the complete puzzle that their number one receiver, DeAndre Hopkins, was not a part of the equation down the stretch, I think that's unfair as well.
Agreed. And he doesn't play offensive line, and he doesn't call the plays, and all of those things that the head coach was responsible for, that's where the Cardinals faltered. It was God, my boss now says you have to be able to block and tackle before you do anything, before you build. And the basics are things that undisciplined teams struggle with when you need to execute. And the Cardinals are built like a straw house. They're an elephant on a sheet of ice, and we don't know how thick the sheet of ice is in any given day. Could be the strongest middle of the Arctic winter, first half of the season, or it could be as thin as my patience right now towards the second half. We don't know which Arizona Cardinals team is going to show up. That shows lack of stability, and that shows that leadership from the GM and head coaching position are lacking. I just think there's a direct correlative between the two.
I think that there are red flags, but as far as, and you should be skeptical as far as their ability to continue the success and the trajectory that they've set in place the last couple of years. I mean, I thought it was going to be tough for them to improve off an 8-win season, and they answered that. They won 11 games. Like, you are discounting winning 11 games in the NFL in a playoff appearance. They did, and when you continually say that they didn't clinch a playoff spot themselves, they would have against the Dallas Cowboys, a playoff team, against the playoff team. Like, you just can.
If everything was on the line, things could have been different, Bo.
If everything, they were still vying for the NFC West. That was a big win. You just conveniently forget all these facts and things that are important to the entire equation. You do.
They had a 3-game lead through 12 or 13 weeks in the NFC West.
Right.
It's not but the truth is
that
in a
outside
game
of the facts.
Oh, so what about Detroit? What about that one?
That was brutal. It was unacceptable.
Yeah, got it. And that was when they could have clinched. So the cool part is that they haven't. They would have. We don't know if they would have. They started 11. They started 10-2. We thought they were going to be the number 1 team in the NFC.
For sure.
We thought that they were going to win the NFC West, but they didn't.
Okay.
So the fact that you're saying that they would have beat Dallas and won and clinched a playoff spot,
Alex,
that's ridiculous.
Alex, they beat Dallas, dude. Reality, facts, cold hard facts. Quit. Like, what world do you live in? Just admit it. They beat Dallas.
Did they clinch a playoff spot?
They would have clinched with that win.
Okay.
They needed 1 W to clinch.
I know. And they had a handful of weeks to do it, and Sean McVay had to do it for them.
Or they would have beat Dallas like they did. And there you have it. But look, the Arizona Cardinals, it's just when you see where they're fighting with Steve Keim, is for where his shortcomings are, the draft, and getting into that for 5 more years, it still is astounding when you see all the success. And I think even like the people that are just guzzling the Kool-Aid would still stop, and this would kind of just their eyebrows would raise on the news today that they've extended this duo for 5 years.
The problem is it's not surprising. That's the problem. Are you surprised? We're kind of shocked. I mean, the years, but are you surprised that this happened? That Michael Bidwell did exactly what he's always done again?
I mean, what this organization, it's clear when you and I talk about what this organization, what we feel like the best direction for this organization is, what this fan base feels like. When you look at the cornerback room last year and you're like, there's just not enough there. And there wasn't at the end of the day, but when they came, like what they viewed Byron Murphy Jr. as a solution at the cornerback spot. Robert Alford, they thought he could bounce back. And they viewed that position group different than the fan base did. They view Steve Keim and his successes and his failures different than we view it. It's like this organization is fully content with taking baby steps. They just are. And like that's going with that is going to be a lot of frustrations because when they signed Kliff Kingsbury, one of the most wild rises to a head coaching position in the NFL, that has to be approached, at least from their standpoint, with patience. Like, you can pan this and you can criticize and you can say it was ridiculous and it was a dumb move. And you're very valid in saying a guy that went 35-40 in the Big 12 at Texas Tech and was fired from his alma mater has no business being a head coach. But at the end, the reality is, if you're going to go that move, if you think that he can be a head coach, you have to be patient with it. and they have been patient, and it's paid off. Like, to say it hasn't paid off, I think that's being a little ignorant.
Okay. That's
3
fine.
to 5 to 8 to 11 playoff appearance.
Mm-hmm.
2 Pro Bowls from your franchise quarterback.
Pretty much on his own. Yep.
You make that point, but you give me nothing beyond that. Like, how has he done it on his own?
I've given it to you all year.
No,
and
you haven't. You haven't given me like one example of
the
how
biggest plays that are made
Mhm.
are when Kyler Murray's doing things outside of the play calls. That's when
Like
the
what?
biggest. Are you kidding me? The first 7 games of the year, the Rondale Moore touchdown catch, most of what happens with him and Christian Kirk. Okay, Kyler Murray behind the line of scrimmage, making things happen. That's the plays that hit ESPN. Those are the plays that Kliff Kingsbury gets credit for when really it's the quarterback. Yet people think that criticizing Kliff Kingsbury is like sacrilegious.
No, it's like not. He's the most polarizing guy in the organization. He's heavily criticized, and a lot of it, people, they're right in it. But to say that every positive play is because Kyler and every negative play is because of Kliff is ridiculous.
No,
it's
not
absolutely
an absolute
ridiculous
statement. But
and to say that, watch the Vikings play again because you're wrong on that. That play created a bust in Vikings coverage.
I wasn't talking about that one.
Was 77 yards.
I was talking about the one in Tennessee. I think it was either Tennessee when he was rolling to the left. It wasn't that one when Patrick Peterson said it wasn't his guy. It was a different one to Rondale Moore. But when I think that, and I understand, Tony, that I understand that coaches get extensions for having good quarterbacks all the time. That's part of the job. It's part of the deal. And quarterbacks get paid money for having good offensive coaches. I think that, without swearing here, that just like Mike McCoy should give Peyton Manning 25% of whatever he makes for the rest of his career, all of his San Diego money, even the Arizona money, etc., Kliff Kingsbury should be giving Kyler Murray a portion of the proceeds for the rest of his career. Because without Kyler Murray doing special things, Kliff Kingsbury isn't even an OC in the NFL. You know why? Because he took an OC job in college because he thought nobody was dumb enough to hire him in the NFL. That's what happened. Well, these aren't things. These aren't opinions. He's failed at every level, okay? And you know what? He got an all-world quarterback that he is severely hindered from being even better than he is now, in my opinion. I think they're winning still, in spite of Kliff Kingsbury, not because of him.
Bruce Arians, I truly believe that. Struggle in Tampa Bay without Tom Brady. Bruce Arians has historically struggled without having a top-tier type quarterback, right? But you don't criticize BA at all. Matt LaFleur, who knows what type of coach Matt LaFleur is? He's got Aaron Rodgers. Aaron Rodgers goes out there and improvises plays all the time. But there's nobody calling for LaFleur's head when Rodgers
Ask Bukowski about that. But I'm sure that there are in Green Bay.
Yeah, but the way that you call for Kliff Kingsbury.
Because he shouldn't have got the job in the first place, Bo.
But
we're talking in this alternate universe.
No, we're talking that somebody is having a tough time accepting what the organization did years ago.
Yeah.
They made the move, dude.
And
it's been successful.
I mean, definition of success in the NFL is very loosely defined.
It's having more wins than losses, and they've done that. They've improved their wins by 2
let me ask you a
or
question.
more.
Let me ask you a question. This is not sarcastic. Let me ask you a question. The last 2 seasons, what has been the strength of this organization on the field?
I mean, if
you said it yourself.
If you look at it statistically, I mean, the offense.
But
the run game.
We watch the games. The defense has been the strength of this team.
No, I mean, the strength of this team is Kyler Murray.
Yes. And the stronger side of the ball, even when everybody was healthy, was you could trust the defense to get stops more than you could trust the Cardinals to get points.
Between this team succeeding and not is Kyler Murray in the offense.
Agreed. And it didn't, so they didn't.
Right.
Yeah.
But they won 11 games.
I would take, now let me ask you this, and I know we're rambling. Thanks everybody for hanging out. Seriously, this is this is awesome. This is fun. Trust me, this is all. This is what makes Bo and me work so well together. Is we never agree on and it's not on purpose. Now, think before answering this.
Mhm.
Would you say that the 2020 season was more of a success than the 2021 season? And I'm saying top to bottom, like growth wise, like did we see that much growth from the 2020 season through the 2021 season besides, elevated personnel with James Conner, et cetera? Or was it kind of a carbon copy of both? And they won games down the stretch in 2020. And I don't know
No,
the
I
answer
mean,
to that.
there was more dominating victories all along the way. I mean, the games that they won, the problem with this year's team is when they were in tight battles, they couldn't pull away. What and you have to wonder, like, the organization believes that, especially with the baby steps forward mentality, is all right, they identified the issue last year and not being able to get over the hump, get to the postseason. They won 3 more games. 2 if you wanna go back and say on a 16-game stretch like it was the previous year.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah.
Now they've identified a finishing issue. I mean, the numbers speak for themselves. Like, I can't argue that. Like, Kliff Kingsbury's resume at the end of the season is atrocious. If they don't figure it out, this is gonna be a long 5 years. But they seem confident that they're gonna be able to kind of figure out this issue.
Why don't you
But
figure it out in the middle of the season? Like, why are they? This is the biggest bullshit of all of this. Is nobody oh, you know what? We're gonna work on that. When what you just laid out is what I've been fighting with people on whatever preposition you got to use. The second half of the season is winning time, and the Cardinals suck during winning time. That is a true statement to what we've seen.
But think about it.
What? So you get a pass because they get a 15-mile lead in the marathon and they still finish, in the middle of the pack?
Think about you're rolling in your fantasy football league and you lose your best player, your best wide receiver, and then you start to play better teams, and you don't have your best player on defense in J.J. Watt, you don't have your best player on offense in DeAndre Hopkins, and you're just going to say, "Well, just figure it out." I mean, look, as much as you want a resilient team that faces adversity and is able to kind of, pull themselves up by the bootstraps and it's next man up and all that romantic stuff. The reality is they lost their number one red zone threat and they lost the biggest guy as far as creating pressure. So it made everything else in that defense look pedestrian. And you could say, hey, make excuses all day, but those are big pieces of this.
Detroit, Indy, Seattle.
Yeah.
Probably should have been able to beat them without.
They should have. Yeah, Christmas night was. They should have won that game.
Especially with what we saw. Where was it? Jacksonville, the game that they had to win to get in the playoffs, and they lost. Like
how many kicks did Matt Prater miss against Indy?
I don't know.
What he left 7 points on the field.
Christmas.
But it's Kliff's fault that his place kicker can't make field goals.
I mean, if you think I know we have kind of revisionist history here. They couldn't get in the end zone down the stretch of the season.
Yeah.
Play calling does have something to do with that. No?
Right. And Kliff did take responsibility for that at his press conference.
Oh,
and
cool.
Remember you don't care because it doesn't fit your narrative. DeAndre Hopkins had 8 touchdowns in 10 games in the red zone. 8 catches for 8 touchdowns. You think that's a big loss?
Do you know how many teams would yearn for AJ Green, Zach Ertz, and what the Cardinals have outside
no
of
team would
Hopkins?
yearn for AJ Green.
Yeah, I don't
no
know.
team did.
So what's your thesis statement for everything we've talked about in the last half an hour?
Yeah, it's still puzzling. It really is. But as far as just trying to connect the dots, Kliff Kingsbury shares the same agent as Kyler Murray to appease Eric Burkhart, to make his client not be a lame duck head coach to coach on the hot seat with just being on a contract for next season. They played nice. The Keim thing, I don't know. I mean, if you ask me, I'm the one pointing my fingers at Steve Keim mostly for their downfall because of their lack of depth and his inability to draft. But this organization And I'll just go back to what we believe is completely different than what they believe. They believe in those guys, and they believe any progress is progress, and they're fully content with baby steps. And baby steps, you have a lot of falling down and get back up and trying to learn, to walk successfully again. It's wild. I can't believe that this news dropped today. And I'm just
for personal
trying
reasons.
Yeah, scrambled to get on air with you guys. But
listen,
look, I'm like as skeptical as I was that they were going to take the step forward like they did this year. I'm skeptical that this is the right move, that they can continue this trajectory. I mean, it's just at some point something has to give.
We've been saying that for 3 years.
But they continue to kind of prove us wrong.
Yeah, okay, fine. Sure. Like that's a consolation you got to give, that yes, they've gotten better every year that Kliff Kingsbury's been the head coach. Are you like, there's a line from one of my favorite shows, The Newsroom. Jane Fonda says that she tells this whole story, and it's, do you want to play golf or do you want to F around? And I feel like the Cardinals are effing around at this point and not having a clear path for the future, just because their stability with who's signing Steve Keim and Kliff Kingsbury's paychecks doesn't mean that this isn't a completely cracked bedrock foundation of an organization, because there is, because it is, and it has been, and nothing has changed except for them getting cute couple extra wins in a season that ended up being a complete letdown, dramatic failure towards down the stretch. So what we're looking at for the future is, if the Cardinals win 8 games next year, or if they win 9 games next year, or if they're under 500, Kliff Kingsbury is going to be on the hot seat anyways. So we're giving him an extra 5 years that's going to take place after next season, instead of actually giving him a little bit of a hot seat feel. Maybe it'll change. Maybe it'll change things. Instead of just placating all of State Farm Stadium, it's like, he doesn't deserve this yet. He doesn't deserve it. He hasn't earned it yet. There's plenty of coaches that have won a bunch of games. Matt LaFleur, we'll see. He'll get a contract, but Kliff Kingsbury has won more games than he's lost once. And you're giving him a 5-year extension. This is institutional misconduct on the hands of Michael Bidwell. It is. And I know that they've gotten better, Bo. I get it. I watch the games, they get better, and then they fall, and then they fail, and then it's like, well, whose fault is it? Well, Steve Keim's going to hibernate for a month and a half. Kliff Kingsbury is going to say, yeah, we got to work on that, and Kyler Murray's going to be pissed off. Is that stability? Because that's where we are.
It's looking at it from a very glass half empty viewpoint.
But it's 5 years. I mean, it's a pool half empty.
It's the NFL. They could fire him tomorrow. They could say,
you know how dumb they're going to look?
Well, they won't. I mean, that's going to be that's going to be the biggest thing, is when they take a step back, what's the next approach? Like, if they take a drastic step back, like, this is going to look like a complete just disaster. Like, they're going to lock in with their quarterback for what we saw, like an astronomical amount of money, huge cap hit, and then you're going to be locked into the brain trust that is Kliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim is your head coach and GM tandem. Like, it's really weird to ride this line where they're looking for continuity. They're looking for, the most rational move just based on the evidence that they have in the performance. But it just seems still so crazy. Like, Kliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim have taken this team and improved every year since 2018, but you still feel like the floor is crumbling beneath your feet. Isn't that, it's a weird paradox. It's being a Cardinals fan. That's what it is.
I mean, so why does that always just have to be?
Well, I mean,
why does that always
what's the next move? I mean,
the next move is erasing what the flip happened today. Like, this is indelible marker.
Because there's
is
so many variables that go into it because of Kliff Kingsbury and who represents him and what
it
happens
shouldn't.
and what
That's
usually
bull.
happens with coaches that are coaching on 1 year's deals. Like it never like if Kliff didn't get that stability, his agent's not happy. And his agent's not happy who also represents your quarterback. It's like they've put themselves in a brutal situation. But like I said, this organization doesn't think like this. It's very content with its baby steps. It's
I
wild.
mean, do you think, like you say that a lot? Do you? And I'm not, negating what you're saying. Do you
Yeah.
think? Do you believe that? Like, do you believe that that's the right way to go about things, or are you just saying taking the side of, well, I'm going to try and rationalize this because I have no other way of describing this. We have a screaming monster on the other side of the screen with you. Like, do you believe that taking baby steps in the NFL is the right way to go about it?
I just don't know when you look at what the alternative is, if you hit detonate and you say, we're done with Keim, we're done with Kingsbury. One, you're telling all the prospective head coaches out there, no matter how appealing it is to come in and coach Kyler Murray, J.J. Watt, and DeAndre Hopkins, they're told that no matter how successful they are, they improve in wins, if the offense improves, if they have a playoff appearance, that if they take one misstep, that they could be gone. That's not appealing to anybody. Like when what you've done is deemed successful, but your organization and your fan base views it as you still didn't get the job done. Like that's not like you're creating a zero-sum game, and like nobody wants. But for an organization that's lost as much as the Arizona Cardinals,
shouldn't matter.
It should. It should.
I mean, you get it. It's not a direct correlation. I mean, if the rosters were exactly the same for the last 30 years, sure, you could see growth. Everything changes in the NFL every year. Like when they think it's a success, that doesn't mean they're right. Like they don't have the answers to the test. They're taking the easy way out to validate the moves that they make. And that's not only asinine, it's backboneless, it's bad press, and it completely just ostracizes. It just takes your fan base and takes a big poop on it. I mean, it's like everybody knows that they're full of crap, yet they still believe that people think that they know what they're talking about. Like Steve Keim getting 5-year extension by itself it's laughable. Like, I'll put a moratorium on this at some point, but it is one of the most ridiculously idiotic things that we've seen in the NFL in a long time. And you've got the Browns, and you've got the Jaguars, and you've got, bad teams. And the Cardinals, lo and behold, try to go under that. What's the thing? Limbo bar? Is that what it is? Limbo? Like, sure. They try to limbo. Like, it's just. Make it make sense. Make it make sense to me.
We're going to do it all off season long. This was, the equivalent of a Woj bomb in the NFL world as far as the Arizona Cardinals. Extending head coach Kliff Kingsbury and GM Steve Keim. You got to imagine Kyler Murray's probably the next piece of this. Free agency, and we'll continue to look at what Steve Keim's going to do with the draft, but that's kind of like a fool's errand trying to forecast what he's going to do. Hopefully he stays away from the inside linebackers this year, at least in the first round. But look, Kliff Kingsbury, Steve Keim, they're locked in for the next 5 seasons until 2027. We're going to be talking about it all next week. Thanks for hanging out with us here on Locked On Cardinals. We got another episode tomorrow. It's going to be it's actually kind of recapping what was said at the press conferences between Keim and Kingsbury outside of the Kyler Murray conversation. Thanks for tuning in live with us. Follow on Twitter at LockedOnAZCards, at Clancy's Corner, at Bob Rack. Everybody who joined the chat, thank you as well.
Yep.
And we'll talk to you soon. Talk to you on Monday right here, Locked On Cardinals. Thanks for making us your first listen.
Love you, Wig.